The mask is seen as a physical item worn to cover the face that was popular in 17th century France among aristocrats, bourgeois class, who attached to this item a manner and expression of concealing one's true identity and reality. More than showing just the surface of one's character, it was rather used as a demonstration of a different identity altogether. It was seen as a means of creating a new persona that one could experience at will. There is, however, a more symbolic side to it, as we will see.
We will be discussing the early mask period Baroque to Classicism, touching upon Louis XIV's court in Versailles, and moving on to Cubism and Surrealism. Finally, we will conclude with the key points about the question at hand and what we can deduce about masks as a representation of France and the Francophone world.
To begin with, we must define Baroque and Classicism. Baroque, a term invented by later critics rather than practitioners of the arts in the 17th and early 18th centuries. It is associated with an artistic style that was expressed in a dramatical style filled with exaggerated exuberance as a means of impressing visitors and expressing triumph. On the other hand, classicism refers to a high regard of classical antiquity, seeking to be formal and restrained, more discreet and traditional compared to that of Baroque standards, and one can say less imaginative and more reason compared to Baroque.
Louis XIV's reign of 72 years is enough to illustrate the domination of his rule and imposition on French order and its influence in the world. To use the example of Versailles that he built, was the ultimate expression of power, as shown by its magnificent artistry, architecture, and design. He used this extravagance to distract and impress, thus influencing the French aristocracy to his court, almost as a mask, as a means of maintaining his authority and power. Behind the mask that was the chateau, he transformed it into a palace for fêtes and parties, at which there was much freedom given to guests. It became the symbol of French monarchy itself, and each decor had to show an expression of power and accomplishment. Louis XIV's reign, then, was a transition of the Baroque to the classical style, which was much expressed in the grandeur of Versailles.
Now we go on to the time of the mask from Cubism to Surrealism. Cubism is an early 20th century style of art, especially seen in paintings, and the first style of abstract art, a process of fragmentation of reality developed by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. These sort of paintings drifted away from the Western art traditions and challenged the perspectives of the observer to reflect the modern age. Surrealism aimed to liberate the viewer from the domination of modern traditional matters, such as personal, social, cultural. It drew upon the imagination of the viewer to explore the unconscious and dream states as a valid form of reality.
To use an example of Cubist painting by Paul Cézanne, The Card Players, this depicts peasants immersed in smoking their pipes and playing cards. However, unlike the drama, drunken state, and rowdy qualities of the 17th century genre, with the unused wine bottle, there is an absence of drink and money.
An example from a surrealist approach called Primitive Art on Surrealism is Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, featuring five nude prostitutes from an actual brothel in Barcelona. The emphasis is on the compressed space of the canvas and the sharp crudeness of the female expression. The women fill the entire space and seem trapped within it. This painting marks a break from the classical past. Brothels were a late 19th century theme, so this image of Picasso's is clearly of our recent time.
Let us now then round up the key deductions from the examples used. In the time span of Baroque to Classicism and Louis XIV's reign, the whole idea and story of the Palace of Versailles seems to hide within it the primary longing for power, control, and destruction, which was hidden beneath the grandeur, fête, and various so-called distractions that the palace gave. With the move of the royal court to Versailles, it ultimately was a palace used as a mask of influencing power over France and showcasing it to the world.
In the time period of Cubism to Surrealism, the Cubist painting of Paul Cézanne, The Card Players, depicts a real everyday scene, with a common experience in that the scene is depicted one of quiet, still concentration, adapting the typical 17th century genre and replacing them with humbled peasants, stone-faced, looking down on their cards, as if it was their sole means of communication outside the workplace. This image seems to depict a clear change in time of French art genre, stressed more on the French farmhand's pleasures of café and a more real depiction of daily still life.
In the final example of Picasso's painting, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, it points out a key message. In the article of Khan Academy titled Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, it refers to the two figures of the night with apparent African masks on. It says, remember that France was a major colonial power in Africa in the 19th and 20th century, and much African art was ripped and sold in Paris. Therefore, a representation of the importance of the influence of Art Negre, the African masks, on the woman depicting the French colonization of women from Africa.